Nope. The red button says you are live. So I know that there's just one person in here. Good evening. How are you? Thank you for stopping by on this Friday before, I guess, the Monday when all the presents are opened. So for those of you who celebrate um, Christmas, Merry Christmas. To all of you who celebrate Hanukkah, Happy Hanukkah. And to all the rest, happy holidays. So trust you're doing good. And let me see here. Let me just kind of squeeze the picture down, as they would say. Ah, there we go. Hi, Sarah. Power Vapor Supply. Hello. Tree, how are you doing? Uh, Blaze and River, how are you doing? Thank you. Sarah, I think I said hello to you. Truth Seeker, hello, how are you? Robin, hello. Happy Yuletide. Indeed. In fact, I have my favorite warrior princess. How are you? Deb L, good evening. Joanna, good evening to see you as well. In fact, I got my holiday festive sweater on because it was 6 degrees here this morning. So, uh, pro guy, thank you. How are you doing? Um, Want to say thank you to everyone for all the kind words on the all the condolences. Appreciate it very much. Thank you. Um, you know, death is one of those things. I got to tell you. Um, Hi, Kayla. How are you doing? Dalton Gaming. Good to see you. Travis, good to see you. Greetings from Knoxville. Hey, I don't know if you're going to get a white Christmas there, but I was actually in Knoxville when it did get a white Christmas. Ah, hello, Kevin. How are you doing from San Francisco? Good to see you. Claudette, good to see you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Um, we, well, we just push forward is what we do. So anyway, thought I would share with you something that uh, I wasn't aware happened. And I bet you that when you see this, you're going to go, I remembered that. And that's when you're going to go, hmm. And I have a couple little anecdotes along the way. So, what are we going to be talking about tonight? I'm going to be talking about the weather. Yeah, I know. Sounds kind of boring, but it really isn't. What I'm about to share with you, you're going to really see. So, I call this the Beaufort Gyre. I think other people, Canadians, have a different way of pronouncing it, but for this Southern boy, that's about how I pronounce things. So, very important. I quite frankly wasn't even aware of what a gyre was. Didn't know. I mean, seriously, how many of you actually know? So, it is a wind-driven ocean current located in the Arctic Ocean polar region. All right. Now, what's really interesting about this region, right? This Beaufort Gyre is where cold, fresh water um, basically pools, and it's big. Now, give you a little bit more background. There has been a lot of studying on this one. And hold on one second. So I was just reading something. Isn't always wondering how they go and text you on that? So anyway, I always like to make sure this. Well, I guess someone caught something in California of a weird atmospheric phenomena. My apologies. I got distracted here. All right. They began to notice changes in this circulation of this gyre, they started seeing it as early as the 90s. And we're going to see this real quick. So I know you're saying, well, what is all this about? It's important when we get established here. So here you can see this is the North Pole. And here is this gyre. It's big. It covers literally the entire part of the North Pole. Um, and then you got this transpolar drift. All right. So circulation, right? Important. All right. Fresh water. Now, they began notice this article was back in 2011. So they began to notice that the freshwater content of the upper Arctic Ocean had increased by 20% since the 90s. Now, when you think about the size and the mass and the amount of water we're talking about, this is a big, big deal. It affects our climate, particularly here in the northern hemispheres. All right, let's move this a little bit further. So, BBC, January 2012, they did a whole thing on how the Arctic Ocean freshwater bulge was being detected. And when you look at the size of this, the area of the bulge began to displace this transpolar drift. All right. So then we come over to this website called the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. Now, what they begin to explain here is that in normal times, there is a high pressure area over this region. And the reason why you have a high pressure ridge that builds up is because of the Arctic ice. As the Arctic ice begins to form, it gets denser, so does the air. The denser the air, the colder the air. And this was important in how the circulation of the oceans and the air currents ran. So what's happened now, and I'll get into this more, is with the disruption of what took place beginning in 2016 and into 2017, particularly at the North Pole, the geographical North Pole, yeah, the scientists are really, I'll get to it when I get to the other part of the presentation, but it's a big deal, folks. All right, so here's one. Let me just get this, folks. I don't want to have the sound on there. Well, so global temperatures could drop next year as ash clouds from volcanic eruptions help cool the atmosphere, claims the Met Office. Now, we're having a convergence of things happening, and this is starting to get a little, well, you'll see it. The last one I want to point out, and this website here, I'm going to do a full video on this, and so I'll actually leave the PDF that you can actually get on this one. And this one is a interesting study, Playing with Fire, how climate change and development patterns are contributing to the soaring cost of Western wildfires. So, yeah, I think you can see where I am at on this. Let me go to stop share. There we go. So I want to make sure I haven't lost everyone. Wow, there are 108 of you in here. All right. Well, hello, everyone. No, it's not smoking. It's not propaganda. Not propaganda at all. It's what we're, anyway, everyone is entitled to their own opinion. So, you know me, when I want to present a case to you, I think it's important that I present this as a lawyer going before any jury to weigh the evidence. Because comments like someone saying propaganda, I don't appreciate that. That's not kind. Why would I put propaganda out there? It diminishes the persons when you start saying things like that. But anyway, so let's talk about the weather. We can say that that's not propaganda, right? I mean, weather is weather, no matter where you are. It's the weather. It affects us all, whether it's sunny, whether it's cloudy, or partly sunny. Never figured out that one. How can it be partly sunny? If the sun is out, we're going to see it regardless in one way or the other, clouds or not. You got the wind, you got the rain, you got these storms, you can get tornadoes, hail, and of course, snow and ice. Now, I don't know about you, but I just like to know what the weather forecast is, particularly in wintertime. Where I live here in Denver, it can, well, anyone that lives where snow is, So climate change, right? So that's all we hear about, climate change. And you got opinions on the right, you got opinions on the left, and you got kind of like most of us are in the middle. We're just observers. I mean, we walk out, and if the sun is like frying our skin, we can say, it seems like the UV is a little high today. Yeah, that's climate change to me. And can't deny it. Climate change is affecting everything. We hear about the sea levels, we hear about pollution all the time. Hey, living where I do on the Front Range, we get this phenomenon called the brown cloud. And anyone that lives in this area can know what I mean. It is a brown cloud. It's where the air just gets stagnant. All right, vegetation. Um, you know, I often think about, the deforestation taking place. I mean, that's always bugged me. You're cutting down trees that actually are the ones that help us breathe. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, Solar radiation, hey, there's something going on. I have done enough of the research. I've got enough videos that anyone can go back and check. We got something going on with the sun. Genetic diversity. That was an interesting one. Uh, Temperatures. Listen, I can tell you what we've experienced here in the Denver area, all along the Front Range, for the last 64 days. And there were a couple of days that interrupted that trend, but well over 95% of those days were all 15 to 30 degrees above normal. We had one day that we were 42 degrees above normal. Now, had this been in the summertime, our normal high in August here can be about 89, 90 degrees. That's the average means temperature here. Well, could you imagine a 42-degree day above normal in August? I mean, that would be 132 degrees. So that alone is been witnessing it right here. I've been very concerned about it. We're in a major drought. I mean, they were talking just 2 weeks ago about forest fires. We're going to talk more about that. So we've all seen how the models, and we're going to look at some of these models, talking about the rapid increase in warmth. But what they're also not saying is also the cooling. There's actually been rapid cooling. So the big buzzword, and every politician, every environmental group is global warming. Well, I know what we've experienced here again the last couple of months. Well, I got to say, I'm glad it was the fall because it would have been. But, global warming, I don't know. I mean, actually, if you go and study this, it's a relatively new thing. Not that climate change, we all agree the earth is changing. Climate changes all the time. Now, the contributions is to whether we're going into global warming or not. The records that we have as far as observations are concerned, when records were actually kept, only go back to about the 1880s. So that's really not enough time where you could spot a trend. So we have to use other means. Now, all of these models that you see here are models that they have, well, it's everywhere. If you have your local meteorologist on your weather, are going to be using one. I know here in Denver, I know one station that uses the 5 of them. And all of their models have been long-term projecting out shows nothing but continued rapid warming of the planet. Okay. Well, um, just within the last 10 years, hello, Al Gore, Inconvenient Truth 1 and 2, thank you very much. It was said by scientists, climatologists, that by 2040, the Arctic region would have an ice-free summer. In fact, many countries were making plans and establishing new shipping routes through the North Pole. You can check all this out. So, this was how convinced the world was, and subsequently the UN. Subsequently, as well as the carbon tax. Now, the previous administration here in the United States was adjoined to, I think, the Kyoto Agreement, and of course, we know the Paris Accord Agreement, where basically it was a love-in that all the nations came together and were saying that, if we don't do something, we're headed for catastrophe. So what did they do? They taxed us. Carbon tax. When this was being battered around, I actually knew people that were trading commodities for carbon tax. Yeah, because that's where it was headed. How big of a carbon footprint? Well, if you had a bigger footprint that you really didn't want to know people about to be taxed on, you could buy the tax credits from others who weren't using it. I mean, it was a total scam. That's propaganda. So anyway, here is what's now coming back around. Because you're going to see, as much as the book of Ecclesiastes says, that which was shall yet be again, we are reliving in recent time an event that we heard about, and you'll see, back in the 70s. April 8th, 1977, Time Magazine came out with the magazine that says How to Survive the Coming Ice Age. But I guess something changed between 1977 and 2008. Couldn't have been politics, could it? Couldn't have been, oh, I don't know, an agenda. I mean, you had to tax people something, right? How do you keep taxing the people? Because eventually they'll revolt. History has shown that. But now, if you wrap it all into saving the environment, well, people will buy that. But here we go. 1977, 2008. Which one is it? Because if I were to give you as a jury, I would have to say, this is a sign of a liar or a very either confused person or someone who is deliberately fabricating a lie. Because, I mean, how does it change in less than 40 years? From the coming ice age to now, well, the planet's going to burn up. I don't know. I mean, sometimes it gives you that kind of weird deja vu feeling. You're going, now, wait a minute, where have I heard this before? And when you begin to look at some of the data, now, isn't this a good Friday night? Come on. You got hot chocolate or whatever you may have with your hot beverage, but this impacts us. So, what many climatologists are now beginning to postulate is that, well, maybe we're in an actually anomaly where this spiking in global temperatures are concerned. Because it was, if you remember well, and we'll get into this more, one of my favorite authors growing up, Dickens. I mean, in my school play, we did Great Expectations, The Tale of Two Cities. And we know that the roof temps, it froze over. They had parties on there. And now we're seeing something that has got them alarmed, and you're going to see why. So, how we measure, because again, we don't have written records that only go back to the 1880s. You have authors that you can, extrapolate information from, many of the historical records. The person writing was cognitive enough to talk about the weather and whether it was hot, cold. But for the most part, when it really gets down to trends, what we do is that we can use fossils, isotopes, that's your carbon 14, right? Glacial, that's where you can take your actual polar ice to get the isotopes, lakes and bogs for the pollen, wood, et cetera, et cetera. So when you start putting this all together, you begin to see some interesting trends here. So on the longest time periods, the scale of hundreds of thousands of years, we see the long ice ages, right? Remember the previous graph. With major glacial advances that lasted 80 to 100,000 years, followed by relatively brief 10 to 12,000 years of warmer interglacials. Now, we are in an interglacial right now. So we've been in it for about the last 10,000 years. Now, we've gotten some understanding of that. The comet impact that hit in 11,000 BC, no doubt, greatly altered a lot of what we saw and still see in these records. So we know that something interrupted that cycle and we're in this brief period of warmth. But even in this 10,000 year period of time, for the most part, it's been cold. Oddly enough, for our planet, being cold is more the norm than being warm is. And the warm periods don't really seem to last a whole long time. Now, you can see this in many different records, many predictions that in the next 1,000, 2,000 years, they expect that we could enter into another glacial period. And that's what all the models are predicted on. Interesting enough, think about this. I thought this was entering. So the warm periods around 1400 BC to 200 BC are called the Roman warm period. Isn't that interesting? There's a lot of correlation here. Now, from 600 to 1200 AD was called the medieval warm period. Now, there's a lot of debate whether or not this medieval warm period actually took place. But right now, for the sake of argument, we'll say it did. And then the rapid cooling of what we call the Dark Ages right? About 17, 1800s. Where in the 20th centuries, we now have what we're experiencing now. So during the medieval warm period, the ice retreated, even at Greenland. That's where it got its name, was Greenland. How many of you remember your history? Eric the Great, right? The Vikings settling Greenland. I remember reading that. I think I was in 8th grade. I don't know about you, but I remember having to study that. And at the time, I thought about that and I was like, why are we learning this? Well, here you go. Um, and of course, we have the records of, particularly in the British Isles, of them growing grapes. The Romans planted grapes in Britannia. And so here we see these two times that we're talking. Here's the Roman one, then the medieval, and boom, it drops out. And here we are now in the late 20th century. Now, what happened was that there suddenly was a change, a rapid change, where it literally sent the Vikings back. I mean, they were not able to survive. They couldn't grow crops. Uh, we know this as well contribute to a lot of the famines in Ireland, England, Scotland. It became very difficult. Charles Dickens was one of our best observers of this time. Again, I talked about the parties on the river. Can you imagine that? Um, so keep in mind, because I'm going to show you something that's going to be very odd. Um, again, I wanted to give you what I'm actually going to be showing in the separate presentation. So here we go. We've looked at the CO2 emissions. We've looked at these things as well. And going through, they've come through, they've looked at peer review papers from 718 individual scientists, right? So this is actually a pretty good picture was painted, what it looked like. I mean, folks, that's cold. I don't know how that would actually happen. All right, so here's the issue. Every month, NOAA issues out its previous month of global warming statistics. And what we have been finding out is, they would say in a poker hand, we got a crooked dealer here. This guy's dealing off the bottom of the deck. And this is what NOAA has been doing. So what they have actually done is this. Are you ready for this? I got angry about this when I was doing this research, because they're showing that all of us, everyone in the chat room right now, we're all a bunch of putzes, is what they're saying, because this is how corrupt the data is. So they began to see that the stations that were out there grew, then suddenly disappeared in this animation from John Getz, who began to post 1,079 stations worldwide that contributed to the GISS analysis. Now, GISS stands for Goddard Institute for Space Studies. 134 of them being located in the 50 United States. Many and many hundreds of the stations that have historically been included in the record and still collect data today continue to be ignored by NOAA and Goddard in global temperature calculations. In the 1970s, the number of stations totaled well over 6,000. Data is available in the large holes in places like Canada, Brazil, Africa. But get this, folks, NOAA refuses to be accessing the data. The last year has been very cold in Canada, but according to NOAA, it's just the opposite. Also, They, in the last year, made changes to the ocean temperature database, removing the satellite data that they claimed was giving a cold bias to the data. Well, isn't that convenient? I mean, if you're the one issuing the data and you don't like the data, so you synthesize it out. Well, that means the data is corrupted, no matter how much you want. And we now know we have caught you in every time in their felonious, deliberate, what we called Weathergate. Remember that 2 years ago? Notice that got buried. So now the oceans now are shown to be warm just about everywhere, and in June was the warmest of records. Now, what does this do for us? If they corrupt the data and they begin to use this as historical data, eventually this data is believed to be authentic. I don't know about you, that gives me a real problem. So they got buoys out there, lots of buoys out there. But trying to track the data, because to go and track the data individually is a Herculean task. These guys are the gatekeepers. So when they begin to alter the data, the raw data coming in, that's called Alice in Wonderland. So here is the problem. When you have students going into their doctoral degrees in the particular sciences, they're going to start looking at the data of the predecessors and how those models were adapted into what parameters of the models and the algorithms were written to. Now, if you, as a coder and a programmer, are getting data that you believe to be, in fact, authentic and valid, and you build your models and you have successive generations of those models, guess what happens? It begins to happen what's happening here. And this is what Willis was, I told you about him earlier. This is what he is saying. The observation of the observer is different than the electronic data that we're given as what is supposed to be authentic data. And they began to look at these because we heard extensively in the 80s, CO2 emissions, aerosol emissions, how they were destroying the ozone. There was this new ozone that was opening up down in the Antarctic. Didn't know what it was. Well, now we know what it is. We know it's a natural phenomenon. Yes, it does grow and it does have intensities when you have fluorocarbons in. But hey, listen, what they're putting in the skies today pales in comparison to what my grandmother was using in her Aquanet. Just going to tell you, how many of you remember Aquanet? My wife and I were just talking about that. Anyway, I digress. So as you can see with the CO2 emissions, now how they were tracking it back in 1895, I don't know. But anyway, what they began to do when they could actually track the emissions in the atmosphere was that there was supposed to be this rapid correlation, right, of increased greenhouse temperatures, emissions, saturating the atmosphere, making things hotter, right? Well, apparently something's wrong here because the data is doing just the opposite. And when you begin to look at the sun and the ocean cycles versus the temperatures, Something is really going on here, folks. I mean, the data is the data, right? So where's this leading to? Well, it's leading into more severe La Ninas, shorter but more intense El Ninos. El Ninos, as you know, is when the Pacific is warming up. La Ninas is when it's cooling off. And you get these really weird spikes right here at the turn of the century, the new millennium. So we're seeing weird aberrations all over the place. What they are, and I'm not going to read this to you, I'm just going to go on. What they are now finding, and finally scientists and climatologists are agreeing, and to a greater degree, more and more environmentalists, that the sun is having more and more greater impact on our weather than what we had ever anticipated before. The data is there. We know it. We know that there's electrical connection between not only the Earth and the sun, but the Earth and the other planets, the Earth and the solar system. We know these things. And we know that when we begin to see these erratic drops and fluctuations, is that we know there is a major cooling and glacification event about to take place. Now, no scientist, and I happen to have a lot of respect for Dr. Paul Beckwith. He has his YouTube channel. I find the man, if you go through his videos, he will teach you a lot about the oscillation, just everything that's going on. And he sounded this alarm months ago when they first detected it. And now it's being detected worldwide. No one will say, though, when or what will trigger it. However, there is now great concern because of what's happening to the Buford gyre. We know this, tons of metric gallons of fresh water is inundating the oceans. And when you begin to mess with the salinity, you know, how many of you remember the movie Day After Tomorrow? Well, that wasn't fiction in there. When you begin to look at the North Atlantic drift, the North Atlantic current, even down into Antarctica, you begin to add this much fresh water back into the oceans. The salinity only needs to drop by just a hair, and you will start having some wild events, what we're seeing. So here's the point, folks. Cold equals high pressure. In the winter times, when you have the polar vortexes, the high pressure systems that form underneath these polar vortexes cause the air to become denser as the ice becomes more dense. And as the air temperature drops and becomes denser, it gets colder. And this is how the currents. Heat, on the other hand, creates low pressure, which in the case of whether it's the Arctic or the Antarctic, not good, bad. Because here's what's happening. In normal times, you would have this Buford gyre right here would throw off the fresh water into the Arctic transporter, right? Problem is this is getting bigger and it's going deeper. It affects the wind currents along with the North Atlantic currents. And what's happened now is that because of last year, get this, folks. How many of you remember this? Last year, fall of 2016, they began to see some wild temperature anomalies up in Alaska, all the way up to the geographical North Pole. The bulge of the fresh water was getting bigger and deeper. What's happened is that last year, Alaska, Canada, all of the Arctic Circle and above experienced warm temperatures that were never, it was unprecedented. The North Pole I believe it was last January. Yeah, last January, are you ready for this? Reached 52 degrees. It should have been 0 or right about 4 or 5 above. Now, if you ever watched the Discovery Channel, The Last Alaskans, it's a documentary of the two families that are homesteaders up there. What they experienced virtually almost put them into unable to exist, a living up there. It was so hot and a drought. Then we saw the same thing on shows like The Deadliest Catch. Same thing. There was, because of this breaking down, where the high pressure could not form over the Arctic. As a result, it threw the polar vortex into a wobble, and it allowed the Atlantic, which we saw this year, with hurricanes taking a sudden turn up to the north, all the way past Nova Scotia and heading into this area that never is supposed to be seeing that. As a result, the Siberian low that is typically over Siberia is now moved eastward. So there is no high pressure there, folks. It's broken down. So this Buford Gyre is expanding with more and more fresh water, cold fresh water. It's now allowing from the Pacific Ocean, coming in through the Bering Straits up into the Arctic Ocean, meeting with now the Atlantic drift. And this is causing chaos. We haven't seen it before. It's a real problem. Now, I have a theory that I think our Earth is tilting, but I could be wrong. What we do know is that it has upset the whole apple cart, where we expect to see high pressure ridges build up. We're not. We're seeing low pressure. It's thrown the whole harmonics, frequencies of this whole polar region up here, folks. And this has and will be potentially, which they say it's going to have dramatic consequences when this thing ever breaks down, if it does. And it's kind of like, you know, you have a dam building behind it. When you have the North Pole at 52 degrees above normal, that's crazy, folks. That's crazy. So, check this out. We know that something is happening. We know that this area is getting bigger. I'll be curious to see what we see out of Antarctica. I'll guarantee you that we will most likely see something out of that region. But here is the other shoe drop on that. And I just wanted to make sure that you understand that the wind patterns have dramatically changed. This is, it has the potential of, again, affecting the whole balance. Now, when we think about volcanoes, and I know I've been going for about 45 minutes, but these are some cool pictures. I worked hard to get these out. I think you're going to like it. So from the space shuttle, we can actually see volcanic ash. And this was from Mount Spur. We all understand what happens with volcanoes. You know, you get that ash, that dust. Ask the people of Indonesia. They'll tell you. This is actually, I think, yeah, it is in Indonesia. And 2017, setting a record of the amount of particulates that are already up there from the active volcanoes this year alone, which is setting all records across the globe. We're seeing volcanoes awake, many cases, thousands of years. And when you look at the dramatic impacts of the atmospheres, not just down at the ground, it's reaching higher and higher, 50, 60,000 feet. More and more. And this is what happens when ash falls. Yeah. It has its own weather. We've seen what's happening in Hawaii. Hawaii is growing in real estate by the second. But we're seeing volcanoes now awake in Mexico, Central America, through South America. Indonesia is absolutely on fire. As is Italy. And as you can see, they create their own weather. It's impacting our weather. This, by the way, is the forest fires around the globe this year. Again, contributing to this. I wanted to show you this because we've seen this in the past. Our planet's obviously gone through some pretty rapid changes. This is how they physically take the measurements now. Not trusting, I guess, Noah. They're not going to let that happen. But it's really getting to the whole point. Here's my question, and I'll wrap this up. Could we be seeing a new ice age? They have come suddenly in the past. These characters are our proof, and this is the proof that we lay out to the world. They were flash frozen. This is not that long ago. And this is the point. If you can flash freeze an animal this size, and we found others, what do you think that'll do? So there you go. I don't know. I thought I just put when I saw this, give me 1 second, please. Thank you. Wow, there's, if I could, I'd buy every one of you a cup of coffee. You've stayed in the chat room. I'm impressed. So there you go. It looks to me like, yeah, global warming, there is something. I mean, like I said, I've been saying this for months here where we live, been living through it. But I've been thinking more and more, what caused this sudden area? And it was huge, through Siberia, all the way through upper North America, coming all the way down into the plains. Frozen like that. So Who knows? I thought it was important enough, though, to bring out, to at least bring it at awareness. Because again, check out Paul Beckwith. I really like the guy. I mean, a lot of people find him interesting, and I find him to be extremely knowledgeable. And he has the one who's been saying, listen, folks, something's going on. And I didn't realize what the Buford gyre was. Who does? But now I get it. So you got no Arctic ice. So you can't have a high pressure system. So you lose now that wind current that used to come down, had the normal type winters and what have you. It's gone. It's replaced now with a low pressure, which is just the opposite. So if you had winds going one way that pushed, for instance, the Atlantic drift, you know, kept it up through the Gulf Stream, that would make sense. Block out the Pacific as well. But no, not today. They got to go and screw it up. Okay, brown dwarf stars. Wayne, are suns from these stars doing this? Good question. So, Nibiru, Planet X. I don't know if there is a Nibiru. I don't know if there's a Planet X, but I'll tell you what I would be willing to bet the farm on, that there is, in fact, and I believe disclosure is going to come forward, that there is, in fact, a brown dwarf out there. Our star, if it's a single star, then it is the rarity in the universe, in the galaxy. Because virtually all other stars seem to have a dancing partner. And seems to me that if, and I put a video out on this, if we are still in the midst of the galactic collision, that where we should not be, I believe that our solar system, this quadrant of space, was at one time part of the dwarf ecliptical Sagittarius galaxy. Actually, I think I had the backward, the Sagittarius dwarf ecliptical galaxy. It's hard, yeah. Jonah, you're right. It's hard for me to keep up because I can't. Trust me. It'd be like having a conversation with myself saying, now you continue to do that. But I am trying to watch it go through, but I'm doing my best. But to get back to the point, I believe we're still in the midst of this assimilation by the Milky Way. I think that this galaxy, the Milky Way, is not the galaxy that we were originally part. And, you know, it kind of goes within some of the, even some of the religious ideologies, beliefs. It would make a lot of sense. Maybe Superman really was more than just a myth. Maybe it's the fact that we have a different sun. Who knows? Maybe a different galactic core. But get to the point. Yes, I do believe that there is, in fact, a brown dwarf out there. I think it's very close in the neighborhood. And I think it could very well be what is impacting. Because I believe our sun has a dancing partner. Who knows? Maybe it has two. I'm trying to read this. See, Chris, I agree with you. I think it's absolutely correct. I mean, it's very interesting when I look at it. I see the magnetic anomalies. I see what's happening to our magnetosphere. I see that our heliosphere is being impacted. I can see that our sun, which is virtually the output, has diminished. Listen, if you just study coronal holes alone and just do the research, you know, we didn't know they existed until Skylab was up there. 1974 is when they brought up that X-ray camera. And they didn't even expect anything. They wanted to see what would happen if you took that X-ray camera and pointed it at the sun. And next thing you know, what we're finding out is that we found that there were holes in the sun. I didn't know what that was. And the problem is those coronal holes are getting bigger. I mean, you can't go, it's like now we don't see the sunspots, but what do? We do see the coronal holes and we see the filaments. So I think that there's something else out there. What is behind us is what I often question, because we see something coming in behind us, but that's just me. So I don't know. I also happen to think that the sky on Mars is not red, but I think it's blue. But I could be wrong. I don't know. I watched The Martian. I thought that was kind of cool. But I'm telling you, our binary twin has to be out there. And if we do have a twin that's out there, then according to everything else that we see by the pictures, I haven't seen them personally, but the pictures tell us that if you got a star, you typically got planets. And then what about rogue planets? They've admitted that they exist. They now admit that rogue stars, they're not attached to any solar system or stellar body. They're rogue. They just, so I don't know. I keep on thinking about, as you guys can see behind the whiteboard, I still hasn't been erased, and there's a reason why. Two events that I still look at: 35,000 BC and 11,000 BC. Something happened. Something on a global scale. I think it was on, I'm going to tell you what my theory is. My theory. I think we're still seeing the impact of the galactic collision. I think our solar system is kind of like right now in a buffer zone. But I think, and it's just me, we've entered into a debris field. We know that. We can see that on the satellites. We know that we have. And I still postulate that we got maybe some rough waters ahead of us, because I don't think that this galactic collision has stopped. And I think that what we've seen on these two events through the geological record tells me that we may be still in this jostle. Listen, the asteroid that came in, which I did the story on, Tyler over at Secure Team did the story on it as well. Now on the asteroid that was not from our region of space, that, they're postulating that that potentially could have been a ship doing interstellar travel. Maybe they were in, I don't know, some kind of suspended state. But I do believe this. I do believe that we are in for, I swear, it's just me, but when you look at the near Earth objects, that they're getting more and more into it, and I've shown you the website, go to neo.org, I believe. We're finding more and more of them. They're getting bigger, which tells me, from a layman, I'm just a layman, but I'm an observer as well, is that it seems like, I don't know, getting crowded is what it looks like. So, if you watch the Thunderbolts project, go over there. I still can't help but not think we've got some records that go in the past that say that Venus entered in, they saw it come in as a comet. I don't know. Maybe that's where the term Lucifer came from. Because in a much older mind, I'm not saying a primitive mind, but I'm just saying a different frame of mind, if you saw that coming in, I could see that could be as the light bearer. How else would you interpret that, internalize it? I don't know. But that's what I keep on thinking. And they have the alien sky. Check out that video that's saying that Saturn at one time filled the nighttime sky with a kind of golden light. It was a different light. Now, I find that fascinating. And that Mars basically got its butt kicked when Venus came through. Now, if that could have happened, imagine if you're watching this. Okay, I'm just reading. You see, that's why I don't read very much. um, but if you saw the planets much closer and you saw this celestial event taking place in the sky, I could see that where I would interpret that as the gods, the god Mars, you know, God Venus, god of love, light. I could see that. I could see how you could interpolate that. It's not so far-fetched. I still did the one video. If God showed up, would anyone recognize him? I don't think so. Anthony, got to make a fuel run. Okay, you live in an RV? Well, buddy, keep warm wherever you are. Well, by the way, and I know good Lord, I've been here almost an hour. Okay. One last thing, trying to get Rex. We've been communicating to do a New Year's Eve show. We're still working on that. Get Jeff, get Heidi, get a lot of others here. I believe, though, disclosure is coming as well with, how shall we say, our roommates. I really do. There is some strange stuff. I mean, I'm seeing some stuff in the skies above me. And check out Orion. All you stargazers, get out there, and if you can see Orion, check it out. But I don't know. It just seems like we're seeing an intensification of sightings of UFOs. I mean, I had this discussion very recently. What did the Pentagon do? What was their purpose? I mean, they don't release this stuff willy-nilly. They got an agenda here. What is it? So now they're saying, that 2 of our F-18s couldn't get close to this thing. This thing kept them in where they wanted and then showed exactly what it could do. I don't know. Are they friendlies? I don't know. Are we seeing the result of what some are postulating, that we've opened up a portal? That what we're seeing is an influx of what some are calling demons. I would probably more prefer the term unfriendlies. But has something changed? Is something about or is already happening? Again, I ask myself, why the footage there? I've heard that Putin is talking about full disclosure. Now, that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, it seems like they have as much as we have. I think the Chinese do too. I think the nation of India does as well. You never hear about that, but I hear in the back channels, yeah. So it seems like, all right, follow me on this, folks. We'll go a little bit over. Is that all right? Okay, we're going to try to do that with them because I'd love to just get this into more discussion. How many other nations have captured, shot down, or recovered what we would call an unidentified spacecraft, a UFO? We know the Russians have. I think the Chinese has done it as well. I've heard that the nation of India. So how would there be that many around? And are they that bad of flyers? What, do they get drunk or something? Maybe when we legalized marijuana here in the States, maybe they're flying through Colorado. I don't know. But gives a whole new definition of flying high, doesn't it? But sorry. Uh, you never know. I mean, could happen, I guess. Um, but it just seems like there's a whole lot of these crafts that are crashing. I don't know. I got a sense that they're all kind of pretty much connected. It's just a matter as to see how we can actually connect the dots. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm still getting the idea of the, could you see it? Guy enters into the wormhole and the portal opens up right over Colorado, and they're happening to have it right at 420, flying right over CU. Yeah, you got to laugh, folks. I'm going to tell you. Um, there's enough things in the world to make us sad. Um, and but it's the joy of being with people like here in this chat room, uh, sharing conversation and laughter. And y'all have definitely put a smile in my heart, and I appreciate it. But I think it's going to get very interesting. I really, really do. I think that we're just on the verge. Again, the question is, why did the Pentagon let that footage out? I mean, granted, what was 2004, right? I mean, so that alone tells me, all right, you a-holes have had this since 2004, and you decided that what? We're big enough now that we could handle the news? I mean, come on. Do they really think that we're just going to go back crap crazy? I mean, there's plenty of other things. We could talk about Fukushima. How about Japan saying yesterday they're expecting a bigger quake in the same area? I wonder how the Nijin would like that. How many of you know about the Nijin? I look at Sarita K. You're right, 420. Yeah. But anyway, so that to me, how about the fact that you don't hear anymore in the press about all you folks over in Europe? I mean, Rex shows you on the Geiger counter here what he encounters. Could you imagine you four folks over there in Europe? You got that radioactive cloud over you? I mean, what the freak is that? And then it makes me think, well, how many more of those are around there? I don't know. It's yeah, it's enough just to. By the way, this is just my personal opinion. Mark my words, they will eventually legalize marijuana in the United States. I believe it'll go route all 50 states legally through the FDA, heavily regulated, but the tax. And then coming to a corner near you. So it's the tax. You know, they've estimated that they can make enough tax off the sale of marijuana on a consumer consumption basis to basically take the national debt down by some 64, 65%. You know who's opposed to that? The big pharma companies. God forbid shall everyone be out there getting high. They're already doing it. I'm just telling you, go watch PD Live one time. Not giving a shameless plug, but watch that sometime. every car they pull over, they're high. I mean, I look at this thing and I'm going, you folks in South Carolina must have some good pot because everyone's smoking it. I mean, sheesh. Now I am a advocate of the CBDs. I think that it should be something that mainstream medical science picks up. But the problem is that the big pharma companies, even if they synthesize it, it's the fact that you can still get the raw product. So they can't make any money from it. And let me tell you what they're doing here in Colorado, since we're talking about pot. Um, it's a multi-billion dollar industry here. California is a boom. Um, After the first year to be legalized there. Washington State already is, but the industry is growing with entrepreneurship. And now you're getting people that would have normally gone into, let's say, the culinary degree, who are going in now into the cannabis industry and becoming chefs and becoming millionaires because of their confections. So there you go. You know, I happen to say this. If I had the whole thing, I can tell you as a person who suffered and still does to a degree from um, fibromyalgia. Um, you know, what I found out with the CBDs compared to what they wanted to give me, and it was Lyrica. Oh no, 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 no. And anyway, so all right. Hope this has been fun. You're right, Scotty. Shameless plug button. I love it. Y'all are like y'all are just really cool. Let's see. Cheyenne Sky. What's your theory, Wayne, on what? I didn't catch the first part of it. Hey, listen, I agree they do. All right, we don't get into that kind of language in here. I see that again. Um, I don't like that. You don't need to do that. But anyway, hey, let's end on a positive note. I've had enough of sadness. So thank you, Scotty. I hope it was at least somewhat knowledgeable. I hope to be with my good friend Jeff Doherty on Sunday morning. I'm not sure. I'm still planning to be there. So we'll see everyone on Christmas morning. Not Christmas morning, on Sunday. It's Monday, right? Christmas is Monday. Is that right? Okay. All right. And as far as zombies are concerned, having been a frequent flyer going through airports, I've ran into more than my fair share of the Walking Dead, the zombies. Granted, they're texting zombies, but nevertheless, they're completely oblivious to everyone around. Best story I have is my wife and I were at a convention and at the Mandalay Bay. And this was actually a couple of years ago. I'm walking, having a conversation with a group, and she literally got knocked down by another woman. The woman was texting like this. And then the woman looked at my wife and said, "Didn't you see me?" And it's just, I have actually seen people walk into columns. Saw one guy just bloody his forehead. Yeah, so it's real. So Merry Christmas, everyone. Happy Hanukkah to everyone. Happy Kwanzaa. Happy holidays to the rest of us, and be kind to one another. Continue to do the acts of kindness unseen. That's going. I'm hearing it more and more and more. And it started here. Y'all are the ones who are spreading it. So well done. I appreciate every one of you. Have yourselves a great evening. We will see you on Sunday. And in the interim, be safe. We will talk real soon. All right. Good night, y'all.